The world did not wake up to a routine diplomatic setback. It woke up to a tightening chokehold on one of the most critical energy corridors on Earth. In the latest escalation, Iran has formally rejected renewed United States negotiations while maintaining a hardened position over the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow maritime passage through which nearly one-fifth of global oil supply flows. Reports confirm that despite earlier signals of limited reopening, shipping activity remains highly restricted, with vessels turning back and maritime insurers warning of extreme risk conditions. This is not occurring in isolation. It follows weeks of stalled ceasefire mechanisms, collapsed negotiation frameworks, and a rapidly deteriorating trust channel between Washington and Tehran. Markets have already reacted with sharp volatility, as crude oil prices surge on fears that even partial disruption in the strait could trigger a global supply shock. What makes this moment particularly significant is not only the rejection of talks, but the strategic decision to link diplomacy directly to maritime control. In effect, negotiations are no longer occurring in a neutral diplomatic space. They are being shaped under the pressure of energy flow restriction, where every statement carries immediate market consequences. Global shipping firms are now reassessing routes. Insurance premiums for vessels transiting the Gulf have spiked, and energy importing economies are once again confronting the possibility that a single choke point could influence inflation, fuel pricing, and political stability far beyond the Middle East. In Washington, the response has been cautious but increasingly urgent. Officials acknowledge that diplomatic channels are not currently active in any structured form, while military planners continue to monitor maritime movement in real time. At the same time, Tehran's position signals something more rigid than a temporary bargaining tactic. The message is clear. Access to the strait is now directly tied to broader geopolitical conditions, including sanctions relief and military posture in the region. What emerges from this moment is not just another diplomatic breakdown, but a structural escalation in how energy security and geopolitical leverage are being fused into a single pressure system. And the consequences of that system are already beginning to ripple outward. For viewers following global markets, international security, or energy stability, this is a developing situation that could reshape pricing, alliances, and strategic calculations in real time. If you want continued updates and deep analysis on this unfolding crisis, subscribe now, because the next developments may arrive faster than official statements can explain them. To understand how the Strait of Hormuz has become the center of global attention once again, it is necessary to step back from the immediate headlines and examine the long arc of confrontation that has defined Iran-United States relations for decades. The origins trace back to the post-1979 geopolitical realignment, when Iran's Islamic Revolution fundamentally reshaped its relationship with Western powers. Since then, the Strait of Hormuz has not merely been a shipping route. It has functioned as a strategic pressure point embedded in nearly every major escalation between Tehran and Washington. Through the 1980s Iran-Iraq War, the so-called tanker war, marked one of the first periods where commercial shipping in the Gulf became directly entangled in military conflict. Oil tankers were targeted, naval escorts were deployed, and the United States increased its presence to guarantee freedom of navigation. That pattern established a precedent. Any serious escalation in the region would inevitably involve maritime security in the strait. Fast forward to the 2000s and 2010s, tensions shifted into sanctions, nuclear negotiations, and intermittent diplomatic breakthroughs. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, widely known as the Iran nuclear deal, briefly created a structured framework for de-escalation. But its subsequent collapse reintroduced uncertainty into the system, particularly regarding sanctions enforcement and regional military posture. In the years following the deal's breakdown, a series of incidents steadily increased pressure. Tanker seizures, drone interceptions, and naval confrontations became more frequent. Each episode reinforced a familiar pattern: limited escalation, controlled retaliation, and temporary stabilization without long-term resolution. The current crisis, however, differs in its sequencing and intensity. Over the past several weeks, diplomatic channels between Tehran and Washington have reportedly stalled at multiple levels. Preliminary discussions that once suggested a pathway toward renewed negotiations have failed to progress into formal talks. At the same time, regional security conditions have tightened, with maritime advisories warning of elevated risk in the Gulf. The most recent turning point came when Iran signaled that no date would be set for talks with the United States, while simultaneously maintaining restrictive conditions on maritime movement through the Strait of Hormuz. This dual posture, diplomatic suspension combined with strategic control over a critical shipping lane, has created a high-pressure environment for global markets and security planners. Meanwhile, energy traders had already been pricing in volatility tied to potential disruption in the region. That expectation is now being reinforced by official uncertainty rather than speculation alone. Key actors in this unfolding timeline include Iran's foreign policy leadership, U.S. diplomatic and defense institutions, Gulf state shipping authorities, and global energy corporations whose supply chains depend on uninterrupted transit through the strait. What makes this moment particularly consequential is not a single action, but the convergence of stalled diplomacy, maritime tension, and immediate economic sensitivity. The system is no longer reacting to isolated events. It is reacting to accumulated pressure built over years, now concentrated into a narrow geographic and political corridor. And that corridor is the Strait of Hormuz.